This module will examine strategies to protect athletes when participating in Special Olympics activities. These procedures reflect the same precautions required to protect any group of vulnerable individuals, irrespective of whether they have an intellectual disability. To achieve the mission of Special Olympics, those responsible for supervising Special Olympics athletes in both training and competition must take positive steps to protect athletes as well as other participants. Screening of staff and volunteers is but one part of our responsibility to protect Special Olympic athletes. Screening is never 100% reliable. Therefore, we need to institute additional measures designed to protect athletes while they are in our care. All volunteers and coaches are expected to abide by the 5 pillars of the Volunteer Code of Conduct. 1. Respect for others. This is demonstrated by showing respect for the rights, dignity, and worth of athletes, coaches, volunteers, and event spectators. 2. Ensure athlete health and safety. Ensure equipment and facilities are safe. Ensure the training, rules, and environment are appropriate for the athlete's age and ability. 3. Act professionally and take responsibility. At no time should a coach or volunteer be under the influence of alcohol and/or other controlled substances during any Special Olympics training. 4. Ensure a positive experience. Respect the talent, developmental level, and goals of the athlete. Ensure each athlete competes in events that challenge the athlete's potential and are appropriate to the athlete's skill level. 5. Uphold and ensure the quality of service to athletes. Seek continual improvement through performance evaluation and ongoing volunteer education. Familiarize yourself with the medical, training, and competition history of any athlete for whom you are responsible. The Athlete Code of Conduct has 7 pillars. They are: 1. Abide by the rules of competition, specifically the Special Olympics official sport rules. 2. Know your rights and responsibilities as an athlete. 3. Abstain from all illegal activity. 4. Avoid disruptive behavior. This includes behavior that is dangerous to yourself or others, including acts of violence, harassment, physical or sexual abuse. 5. Avoid profane or abusive language. 6. Maintain high standards of conduct. This includes self-control and responsible behavior. An athlete should consider the well-being of others and display courtesy and good manners. 7. Honor the Special Olympics oath. Let me win, but if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt. Here are some tips to prevent physical abuse of Special Olympic athletes. Refrain from the use of corporal punishment in all instances. Corporal punishment includes hitting, slapping, spanking, or other forms of physical discipline. Food or water is never to be withheld as a form of punishment. Water should always be available to athletes during strenuous exercise. Personal care and hygiene should be only performed by personal support workers. The only medications that will be dispensed to an athlete are those which have been prescribed by an athlete's physician as indicated on their consent form, signed by either a parent or a legal custodian. Athletes are responsible for taking their own medication. Here are some tips to prevent emotional abuse of Special Olympics athletes. All coaches, Special Olympics staff, and other volunteers will treat athletes with courtesy and respect. The use of denigrating or demeaning nicknames or the permitting of their use by others is not in keeping with the purposes of Special Olympics. In no instances will coaches or other volunteers use profanity or otherwise curse at athletes for their performance or behavior during competition or practices. Special Olympic athletes will at no time be threatened or intimidated for any purpose, including attempts at improving athletic performance or for controlling behavior. Any discipline techniques will be constructive and positive. Here are some tips to prevent sexual abuse of Special Olympics athletes. Physical contact is important for normal human development. Hugs can be especially important to reinforce the positive nature of athletic competition for those who come in first as well as last. Hugs between Special Olympic athletes and volunteers should be open, not secretive, and respect the limits set by the athlete. The staff and volunteers must respect any resistance by the athlete to physical contact. Remember that hugging is an activity involving more than one person, and respect for boundaries must be mutual for all parties. There may be times when an athlete will attempt inappropriate physical contact with a coach, volunteer, or other athlete. In such cases, the coach or volunteer should identify the objectionable behavior, explaining that it makes them feel uncomfortable, and suggest an alternative such as shaking hands, fist bumps, a team cheer, high-fiving, or use some other form of expression. Staff and volunteers need to be very specific about the behavior that is troublesome, as well as alternative ways to express the emotions that the athlete feels. In cases where it is necessary for a coach or volunteer to speak privately with an athlete, this should be done within sight of others. In cases where personal care support is required, families are encouraged to provide one-on-one support as needed. Volunteers are not required to provide support outside of their level of comfort. To protect athletes, staff, and volunteers, there should be at least 2 adult support staff, coaches, or volunteers present when supervising activities such as showering, changing, and toileting. Staff members, coaches, and volunteers should at all times avoid touching any area normally covered by a swimsuit. Kissing on the lips and seductive massaging is not permitted. Massaging pursuant to an injury or strain is permitted by trained support workers, but should be subject to observation by others. When Special Olympics events require athletes to stay overnight, sleeping arrangements should take into consideration the age, gender, and development level of the athletes. Male and female athletes require separate accommodations, as do coaches and athletes. Special Olympics staff and the assistance of volunteers should know where the athletes are at all times while in their care. Subtle changes in behavior may offer the only visible indication that an athlete is the victim of abuse. Abuse causes stress, and victims often exhibit stress-related behavior. Examples of such behavior include sleep disturbances, aggression, loss of interest and withdrawal from activities, depression, and immature acts. Uncharacteristic changes in behavior that last more than a few days indicate a possible need for intervention, but are not a certain indicator of abuse, as there are other causes of stress. Physical indications of abuse may include, but are not limited to, the following: questionable injuries that do not match the given explanation, repeated injuries or bruising to the same location. Bruises of different colors indicate different stages of healing, a potential indicator of injuries occurring over more than one occasion. Chronic hunger and poor personal hygiene. Inappropriate clothing for the climate or weather conditions. Unattained medical needs. Statements by the athlete concerning inappropriate touching or physical harm. Reporting suspicious activity. Suspicious activity should be reported to a head coach or community leader or Special Olympics staff. Reports will be reviewed and reported as appropriate. Suspensions may be utilized during investigations. Special Olympics reserves the right to expel athletes or volunteers as a result of suspected or confirmed physical, sexual, or emotional abuse of a Special Olympics athlete. Be ready to say, what makes you think this activity is suspicious? and when you witnessed the activity or first suspected it. Who to tell? If the incident occurs during a Special Olympics function, tell local Special Olympics leadership, preferably staff. If you suspect that an athlete is in immediate danger, notify the police or appropriate authorities first, then Special Olympics. You may be required to complete a formal incident report. When the victim is a minor or member of a vulnerable population, you may be required to make an official report in addition to the report you file with Special Olympics. Please consult your provincial or territorial chapter for reporting requirements. When working with young athletes under the age of 18, please review your provincial or territorial training module for additional legal or reporting requirements. Reporting is not the same as accusing. It just alerts professionals to investigate. Here are a few tips for reporting incidents. Minor incidents such as paper cuts, small scrapes, and behavioral infractions should be recorded by the coach as a note, but may not require a formal incident report to be filed. All other incidents, including behavioral incidents, medical emergencies, physical injury, property damage, theft, code of conduct violations, or any other major incidents should be reported to your community leader or provincial or territorial chapter through the designated form or reporting method. When reporting an incident, 1. Record or document the incident as soon as possible. 2. Record all related verbal communication as close to verbatim as possible. 3. Record events sequentially. 4. If it is a handwritten document, make sure it is legible and number your pages sequentially. 5. Make sure your recordings include the time, date, and location of the incident. 6. If the incident was witnessed, observed, or heard by others, include their full given name and their contact information. 7. Be sensitive to the privacy of others. Your documentation should only be shared with the necessary individuals. 8. Contact a Special Olympics staff member if you are unsure who should receive a copy of your documentation. Responsibilities for coaches. As a leader within the Special Olympics organization, you must take the steps necessary to protect yourself and your program. Preventing injuries to participants and spectators is a primary risk management objective. To effectively do so, the following should be used as a guideline to assist you in developing programs and techniques to reduce the risk of injury to athletes. Be mindful of the environment. Select an appropriate venue and use proper equipment. Be prepared. Provide proper planning for each step of training and competition. Medical assistance. Medical support is to be provided at all times. The greater the risk within an activity, the higher level of medical support required. Instructions and competition. Ensure appropriate sports skills and instruction for practice and competition. Inherent dangers. Inform athletes of inherent risks associated with a specific sport. An emergency action plan is to be developed by coaches to prepare for a potential emergency situation. By preparing an EAP, coaches become equipped to respond to an emergency situation in a calm and responsible manner. An EAP should include procedures for emergency medical support, the event of a postponement or cancellation, communication with the athletes, caregivers, and the proper authorities, and incident reporting. Special Olympics Canada and its provincial and territorial chapters have the sole and absolute discretion as to any disciplinary actions to be taken if a person violates the code of conduct. Any actions taken can be appealed as per the policies and procedures provided by your provincial or territorial chapter. The following disciplinary actions may be taken: issue a warning, place an individual on probation, suspension or expulsion from further participation in any Special Olympics program or activities. Athletes and volunteers have the right to appeal disciplinary actions as per the policies and procedures set by their provincial or territorial chapter. Appeals should be submitted in writing to the appropriate provincial or territorial chapter. It is the responsibility of the applicant to make themselves aware of the timelines and procedures regarding the appeal process. Please refer to your provincial or territorial training module for specific information and timelines regarding the appeal process. All Special Olympics athletes, staff, coaches, and volunteers are covered by Special Olympics Canada liability insurance. Proof of additional insurance coverage required when booking facilities for Special Olympics use can be obtained from your provincial or territorial chapter free of charge. For additional information about insurance, please consult your provincial or territorial chapter. Atlantal axial instability is an orthopedic condition found in approximately 12 to 22% of individuals with Down syndrome. Misalignment of the first and second cervical vertebrae results in the potential for permanent damage to the spinal cord. Individuals who have Down syndrome that have tested positive for atlantal axial instability shall not be permitted to participate in sport training and competition, which by their nature result in hyperextension, radical flexion, or direct pressure on the neck or upper spine. Such sports training and competition activities include, but are not limited to, alpine skiing, high jump, pentathlon, powerlifting, soccer, basketball, artistic gymnastics, diving, butterfly stroke, and any warm-up activity that put undue stress onto the head and neck. For more information about any of the items discussed in this module, please refer to the additional resources found on the Special Olympics website, your provincial or territorial chapter website, the resources section of this module, or speak with a Special Olympics staff member. Coaches will receive additional training through the National Coaching Certification Program.